All right, in addition to watching this video, please do the following pages of reading in your textbooks, pages 303 to 307 and 309 to 313. As you're reading, if you come across any information that is either new or it helps clarify information that you've already written down in your notes based on the videos, please update your notes so that when you arrive to class, you are fully prepared to talk about Britain's involvement in India and China resisting outside influence during the period of imperialism. So today we talk about China and the West. So what to know about China? You should know that China is a very old country and that they were largely self-sufficient. The basis of that self-sufficiency was that China had a healthy agricultural economy. Back in the 11th century, they had acquired a quick-growing strain of rice from Southeast Asia. And by the time of the Qing dynasty, the rice was being grown throughout the southern part of the country. They had also, in the 17th and 18th centuries, traded for maize and sweet potatoes, and they got peanuts from the Americas. And so these crops helped China increase the productivity of its land and more effectively feed their huge population. So these crops allowed China to feed their people from then on, and China really wasn't in a position that it needed to trade with anybody. In addition to their agricultural economy, China also had a large industrial economy. They had an abundance of natural resources, including, but not limited to, salt, tin, iron, and silver. And the mines, the salt mines, tin mines, iron mines, silver mines, provided work for thousands of people. So there were wage earners, wage paying jobs. There were natural resources that fueled the industrialization. And China was also known for making beautiful silks and porcelains and cotton products. So again, China was not in a place where they needed to trade with anybody. They were perfectly content on their own, and the trading that China participated in was only for the benefit of China. So they have little interest in trading with these foreign countries. And as a result, what China did is they actually limited their trading to a very small part of their country called Guangzhou. And the balance of trade in Guangzhou was clearly in China's favor. China made more for its exports than it spent on imports. So the trading is all for the benefit of China. So these European merchants that are arriving into Guangzhou and expecting to trade are realizing as time goes on that they are not making any money. In fact, they're spending more than they are making. And so these merchants are trying to find a product that China does not already have and that they would want so that the balance of trade would tip into the Europeans' favor. And luckily for England, they had acquired the colony of India. And in India, a plant grew called the poppy plant that created opium, which is a narcotic. It's a habit-forming drug. It's highly addictive. And so what the Europeans began to do is they actually began to illegally smuggle opium into China for non-medical use. And the European merchants got the Chinese hooked. And this addiction really took hold. By 1835, as many as 12 million Chinese people were addicted to the drug. That was a significant number of people. It had been used, opium had been used in centuries previous to this for pain management. Today, we actually use morphine for pain management, and it is a derivative of the same plant. So opium is at the level that morphine is at, which is a quite high level of medicine in this country. So Here, this is being smuggled in for non-medical use. 12 million Chinese people become addicted to the drug. And they now are in a position, the Chinese are, that they need to trade for opium in order to continue their habits. And because it is an addiction, it reaches a point where it's not really a want, it is a need, that they would need to have this drug continue to come into their country. And it's at this time that the balance of trade tips in the favor of the European merchants, specifically the English merchants. But the growing supply of opium in the country caused great problems for China. When you have a significant portion of your population addicted to a drug, there are some effects that kind of spread out through the entire country. So what happens is that the Empress has her highest advisor write a letter to Queen Victoria. And that letter asks Queen Victoria to intervene in order to stop the illegal drug trade. And in the letter, the advisor writes to Queen Victoria, and he says that he's aware that the smoking of opium is very strictly forbidden in England because England recognizes the harm caused by opium. And he goes on to say that since opium is not permitted to do harm in your own country, then why are you allowing it to do harm in our country? So he is calling on kind of the queen to do the right thing here, the moral thing, and to put the money aside, the profit aside, and do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Unfortunately, this plea falls on deaf ears, and Britain refuses to intervene and stop the illegal trade because there is simply too much money to be made. So in 1839, China attacks the British in an effort to stop the opium trade. Now, most of the battles took place at sea, and we know that Britain had the best navy by far. And so these battles result in a humiliating defeat for China. In 1842, China, being the loser of this war, is forced to sign what's called the Treaty of Nanjing. And this treaty gives Britain many rights to trade in China. It also gives the island of Hong Kong to China, and Britain ends up keeping Hong Kong from like 1842 all the way until like 1900. So they keep Hong Kong for quite a while. Actually, 1990s, not 1900. They keep it for like 150 years, and just recently Hong Kong was returned to China. So the Treaty of Nanjing gives the United States, Britain, and other foreign citizens a series of rights to trade in China. It also means that the foreigners are not subject to Chinese laws. And in Guangzhou, which is the trading district, and in 4 other trading ports. So many Chinese ultimately greatly resented the foreigners and the bustling trade in opium that they conducted. And this leads to a revolt. But before we get to the revolt, here are some pictures of the Opium War. So this is British soldiers dealing with or in battle with Chinese rebels. And this is a picture of or a painting of one of the battles taking place at sea between the outdated Chinese ships and the Britain's steam-powered gunboats, which are a much more advanced ship. So foreign influence is going to grow. So China has continuing problems after the Opium War. They have hunger is a problem. The population grows significantly. It was a 30% gain in just 60 years, but food production really did not increase in China. And so what you have is hunger being widespread, even in good years. You have, of course, opium addiction, which was going to rise steadily as the opium continued to flow into China. And as their problems mounted, the Chinese people began to rebel against their rulers, the Qing dynasty. So the Taiping Rebellion is an example of that. And it was during this rebellion that a peasant army of some like 1 million people took control of large regions in southeastern China, and then in 1853 captured the city of Nanjing and called it the capital. And the leaders of this government, this new government that was being created, continued to kind of feud among themselves. And at that time, the emperor, the empress of the Qing dynasty, and imperial troops from Britain and France all launched attacks against this new government in order to get rid of it. And so by 1864, the rebellion had really come to an end, and the Taiping government was brought down. But China paid a terrible price during the Taiping Rebellion. Remember, there's over 1 million peasant army people. There were 20 million, maybe twice that many, that were killed in the rebellion. So you have a huge number of people that are killed in this rebellion alone, and that's not even talking about the other rebellions that took place in China because of the internal problems. And of course, there are external pressures as well. So other nations, outsiders, are aware of the problems that are happening within China in the mid-1800s. And so they work to take advantage of those, and they attack China. What this means is that with each attack, China loses. And after each loss, they're forced to sign a treaty that gives more and more rights to foreign countries. And most of the rights that are being given to these foreign countries are economic rights, or rights to trade, rights to not follow the laws, much like the Treaty of Nanjing had been. And these foreign countries are basically gaining a foothold in China, where these foreign nations were controlling trade and controlling investment. So meanwhile, the United States is growing more and more concerned that other nations were going to divide up China and block the United States from doing trade with China. So we announced what's called the open door policy. And essentially what the United States is saying with this policy is that all nations will be allowed to trade with China, that no outside country can claim China as a colony. So China is to be left quasi-independent, and its doors are to remain open, hence the open door policy, for all nations around the world to trade with them. So the country, China, is independent, but it is at the mercy of foreign powers. So just as we saw in India, the local population, the indigenous people, if you will, are resentful of this foreign influence. And the longer that the foreigners are in power, and the more Western the society becomes, the more frustrated the local population gets. And so nationalism rises in China just as it rose in India and across Africa and even in Southeastern Europe, which we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks, nationalism grows. And a group called the Boxers is created, and they gather to demonstrate their discontent in an episode known as the Boxer Rebellion. So during the Boxer Rebellion, the Boxers, these Chinese nationalists, surrounded the European section of Beijing. So Beijing is a city in China. And so think about San Francisco. In San Francisco, if you've ever been there, there are areas of the city that are ethnic enclaves. For instance, there is Chinatown in San Francisco. There's Little Italy in San Francisco. There is Japantown in San Francisco. So just like in an American city, we have these ethnic enclaves. In a Chinese city, there was an ethnic enclave, and it was the European section of Beijing. So the Boxers surround that area of Beijing, and they begin to launch an attack on the people that are there. And it was during this attack that the Empress showed her support for the Boxers in her words. She applauded their action. She encouraged them to continue, but she did not offer any physical support. For instance, she did not send in the Chinese military to offer support to the Boxers. So for several months, the Boxers keep the European section of the city under siege. But in August, so this happens in the spring, in August, 19,000 international troops marched on Beijing, and they quickly defeated the Boxers. These forces included American forces, German forces, British and French forces, Japanese forces, I believe, were also involved. So you have a multinational group of soldiers, 19,000 of them, that are sent to Beijing to put down the Boxer Rebellion. So that ends, and the Chinese people have two realizations. First, they must continue to resist foreigners. Secondly, their government must support their efforts in more than just words. So that is the end of the slides today. A quick video, but a lot of information. So feel free to rewatch or pause as necessary, and come to class with any questions that you might have. As a reminder, you are reading these pages in the textbook before class. Thank you.